Let me ask you something a little specific about service too. Like if you're when you approach approach opening older bottles of Napa Cab, when do you? I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the service of that, and like when do you, if do you decant older bottles? Are there certain, there's some producers that we know, like Diamond Creek, like you need to decant that, even if it's 20 years, like it's a beast. You know it's going to be rich. It needs time to open. Other wines that I've found that, like, that was ready to drink right away. It didn't need to open. And it changes a lot from vintage to vintage, right?
Sure,
and I mean, you do that every night. Like, are there certain guidelines that you have? Is it specific to vintage and producer? Like, how do you approach that?
No, I mean, you're so spot on, especially with the Diamond Creek reference. And I mean, that is, I wish there were like a clear-cut set of guidelines. Like, we do this every single time. We don't do it if blah, blah, blah. But there's not. I mean, ultimately, and that was one of the things that I learned when I started, and one of the things that I'm teaching the 3 new sommeliers, 2 of which started 5 months ago, 1 of which started a month ago. I always think a really good way to decide whether or not to decant is pour a few ounces in glass, like maybe 2, no more than 3 ounces. Give it a good swirl, let it sit in the glass, walk away from it, come back 3 to 5 minutes later, see what it does.
Right.
Sometimes, especially California wines, sometimes those wines will like tighten up in glass, and as they get air, you'll see just gently what it's going to be doing. If it starts to fall apart in glass, don't decant it. If it starts to firm up and it feels like it's all the fruits coming back, all the structures coming back, that's probably a good sign that you should decant it. I never like to use massive decanters. If I'm going to decant, it's generally like a tight Zalto, unless it's a Magnum, and that's a double.
Right.
So we do not use, categorically across the board.
Really, even for like young wines, for example?
No, we don't use big like saucer decanters or anything with like massive amounts of air. We only have 1 of them, and we only use it in very rare instances. Napa Valley wines, I think, especially young ones, people always want to decant it very, very heavily when they're young, and I don't always think that's the right way to go. They always think that, putting it in decanter is going to soften the tannins. That's not necessarily true. A lot of times what happens is more of those like alcohol smells, those like ethers sort of come to the surface and they poke out, and the wine sort of gets disjointed. And decanting can really push a wine in a direction it doesn't necessarily want to go too early, especially when it's young.
Interesting.
And that's why I'm generally pretty conservative. And that was something that Scott really taught me, and he was sort of like me, very gentle about decanting. Never give a wine too much air. And especially when you're at a restaurant, you can always go back and decant, right? Like, you can always check back with your table, and you should be checking back with your tables. If you're on the edge, you're not really sure whether you should be decanting, maybe give it a gentle decant, maybe don't, but pour half glasses, see what it does in the glass, check back, see what's going on, and then you can decant after. And that's a really nice step of service and a way to touch the table that makes it seem, and people are paying a premium, so like give them what they're paying for.